All right. Hello, self-sustainers. How you doing today, my beautiful people? So we're doing yet another amazing interview, and we're seeking out these individuals on the planet who understand what true sustainability is. And this next guest is at the heart of that. He's done years and years and years of study of what it means to put things together, materialize, to figure out how to make things work in a very beautiful and self-sustaining way. But I'm going to have him talk more on that. As always, we've got a list of questions to ask him to help him develop further into who he is, and hopefully we can collaborate in the near future. So, who I have with me today is a young gentleman by the name of Dorian, and he's all over Europe at the moment. He's in Spain at the moment, and showing us a beautiful background there. So, Dorian, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
There you go. Hello,
That's
everybody. My name
amazing.
is Dorian Hanaor. I'm an associate professor of material science and engineering from Australia and Germany. Most recently, I've been teaching various courses on sustainable construction materials in Australia, Germany, and China. And in addition to that, I work in consulting, helping various players in the field of sustainable materials develop their ideas and connect with the right partners to see their ideas come to life. And what Scott does with his hemp domes is really inspiring, and that led me to connect with him. I really like the idea of vernacular architecture, people building their own homes. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you for that. And I can appreciate all the work you've put into it and still putting into this, because we need these eco warriors to get out there and to be pushing this more and more. So thank you. All right. So the questions that I have for you, the first is, not everybody understands what a materials engineer is. So could you explain to the viewers what that is and what you do for people?
Well, material science often comes in a bundle of material science and engineering. They're really intertwined. So, in its simplest form, we could say that a material scientist deals with chemistry of the solid state. So, what's happening at an atomic level right up to the system scale. So, both the engineering and the science of materials spans a lot of scales. So, understanding how processes affect properties and how that ultimately governs the performance of a material. That's the domain of a material scientist. And materials engineering is really designing those processes and designing the right materials for a given application. The most classic example in material science is always an alloy, a metal, where the atoms present, the metallic elements that are there in their which elements are there and in which concentration, how they're organized at an atomic level, that is their crystal structure. Crystallography is something that's encountered a lot in material science. So yeah, how those atoms arrange at a crystal level, and then how those crystals pack together, what's called the grain structure of a material, the microstructure of a
Mhm.
material, how that affects the overall properties. So for example, in an alloy, it's not only the composition, but the amount of defects in the crystal structure, the size of those crystals, their distribution, the presence of flaws and voids. Those will all come together to give us the mechanical properties that we take for granted.
Gotcha.
Um,
And thus looking for strengths, weaknesses, those types of things in the materials.
yeah, I think a lot of what a material scientist can and should do is find the best way to treat a material, and this, I guess, is where it crosses over into a lot is really understanding what's pragmatic. And yeah, if you look at the automotive industry, the parts are basically made of steel. But the alloying elements and their processing is done in just the right way to give the best cost performance relationship. So that's a very engineered domain where really a lot of thought has been given to not over engineering things, right? We could make everything out of some super titanium alloy and try to make everything the best as possible, but that's not really practical. And this is maybe where sustainability starts to come into the picture. We also have to look at what nature gives us and work with that. So especially when it comes to scarce and rare elements and exotic compositions.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because that was my next question, and you led right into it. So, I was curious of how does all that relate to sustainability, but yeah, so marrying naturals with what man is doing, and I suppose trying to. I know in this world they often do what's something called planned obsolescence, and it's an unfortunate word that's had to have been created, but in steels and those types of composites, I hope they're not doing that particular thing. Maybe they do it in diodes and transistors, but maybe not so much in the steel. Maybe they do,
Mhm.
maybe they don't. I don't know. What do you think?
Um, yeah, it's hard to say what's planned and what's not. I think a lot of the sustainability challenges we have come from people's short-term focus on profits.
Right,
And largely the imperative for economic growth is what's essentially behind that. And it's hard to point fingers and decide who's to blame for this. It's
right,
society. Is it some bug that we have as human beings that we constantly want to challenge ourselves and do more? I mean, I'm here in Spain, and there's absolutely, other than there's not much for me to do here other than go for walks in the beautiful nature. And yeah, I think if I were to stay here much longer, I'd want to start challenging myself, and we have this drive to engage with the world and do stuff, and this can be uh both, it can be our damnation and it can be our salvation in that
very true.
sense.
Very true. Very true. Well, what do you think the current paradigm is in construction? How did we get here?
Thanks. Yeah, good question. What I tell my students when I was teaching in the Technical University of Berlin and in UNSW in Australia, I would always point to the Industrial Revolution and the industrialization of our building materials. When you look at the space of sustainable materials today, you'll see that there's a lot of discussion about going back to vernacular construction, to local, using local materials, and yeah, I am quite passionate about that because I know that we are able to build homes. We've been doing it for 20,000 years. We're
Right,
not talking about, some kind of quantum computer here that nobody's ever made before. We've been building houses for approximately 20,000 years, give or take. And so this is something we know how to do. But why it's not sustainable, I trace that back to this industrialization. So up until the Industrial Revolution, the distinction between builders and the producers of building materials wasn't so clear. So who builders would make their own bricks, they would make their own mortar, they were involved in everything from literally from the ground up. So there were some exceptions where people would bring things from far away, and this would
right,
typically happen where there was some ritual or some perhaps even spiritual reason, like the Stonehenge, built, I think, thousands of years ago.
right,
Stones, 100-ton stones that were dragged hundreds of miles to the site, right? This is an incredible effort uh,
right.
for some profound spiritual reason that we've perhaps lost sight of today. But beyond
Yeah,
these sorts of ritual or spiritual contexts, I think most construction was done with materials that are available. So if you lived somewhere with clay, you'd or a good earth, that would be the basis for your building materials. And same with the limestone that would be used for mortar would be produced on site.
right,
Um, and there wasn't so much, and the stone, of course, you see this when you travel in the world, that stone architecture reflects the nature of the lithosphere in that area. The Earth's crust in that particular region will determine the stone used in buildings.
gotcha.
And it was only in the Industrial Revolution that this thing called concrete emerged. And it wasn't necessarily that we needed this or that we were looking for it, but it needs to be understood in this context of industrializing materials. Now somebody else is going to make the cement in a factory somewhere, and you as a builder are going to buy it rather than make it yourself. And
Right.
it also ties in, I guess, to that thing of economic growth. Is it it's the trend to commoditize everything, and if it's not marketable, then it's not profitable. Yeah, and this is one of the biggest challenges in making construction sustainable is decoupling it from economic growth and empowering people to use their own hands and their own locally available resources, whether it's stone or earth or wood, to construct dwellings.
Sure. I would say also we can, if anybody is to travel, and Europeans do typically travel a lot, and Americans, I hope, can get over to Europe to see what I'm talking about. But there are stones that were local that are built in all these small villages as you go through all of Europe that still are standing from 800 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
Hmm.
Here in America, we have, because of the Industrial Revolution, we have homes that are being torn down within 30 or 40 years or
Yeah.
falling apart. And there's been a degradation of the quality of building, maybe
Hmm.
because of the Industrial Revolution or the profit margin that we were talking about or the planned obsolescence we were talking about. But whatever the case is that we definitely have lost sight of good, strong building practices and materials, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think not every building needs to stay for 800 years. But if we need to change that building, we should be able to do it without incurring a huge environmental cost. I think in Japan, it's the building is not meant to last. But and stone and earth houses are great in that they can last. We have earth unfired earth construction in Mali, some mosques, some palaces, or um, from dating back to the some dynasty around 1,000 years ago. These earthen constructions, so these massive earth structures that have been there for 1,000 years. Now, if you were to abandon that structure, it would disappear very quickly. Yeah, it would be reclaimed by earth, which is great, which is what we want.
Right, right.
If you were to abandon a stone house, you'd also find that it might get reclaimed by nature very quickly and disappear. But with proper maintenance, if the structure is still serving a purpose and still of value, with proper maintenance, it can last a very long time. So a lot has to do with our relationship to the structure and its use. What I would also add to earthen construction is that you can reconfigure it. You want to add it, you want to change your house, you can use the same earth, the same stones, and rebuild your house and renovate it. Whereas in most construction, most urban centers in the Western world today, renovating means getting a dumpster, throwing the old materials out, and bringing a
Right,
whole batch of new materials, new cement, new concrete, so new
right.
bricks, everything new, new plasterboard, yeah, new glass, and that's of course not something that's
It's
sustainable in the
not,
long.
it's not sustainable. Yeah, right. So this is one of the reasons why I'm excited about my hemp, because as you pointed out, number one, if everything goes away, that hemp will compost right back into the earth. Number two, if I want to build onto that structure, then all I have to do is start to reform the hemp again. And I don't need to be throwing a lot of stuff away like you were talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so pretty excited about that.
yeah, I
Uh,
think
so
that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. So this segues well into the next question, and that is, what are sustainable materials that could be used for the building environment in today's world? Things like hemp, like we talked about. What are some other sustainable materials?
Yeah, well, there's a lot that's being done with bio-based materials. So wood and engineered wood composites, engineered and wood polymer composites. Even so, plastics, some bio-based plastics, plastics derived from seaweed or from waste. So the residuals of wood processing. So obviously timber is of value in its own right, but the leftovers can often be processed into certain polymers that replace fossil fuel derived polymers. My personal favorite is stone. So I would love to see more stone being used. Um, And then there comes the issue of green concrete, which is a very complex issue to unpack. And yeah, earth-based construction. So I think there's also biocementation, so using microbes to cement earth together. So basically alternatives to high temperature processing of earth, so brick making, and alternatives to traditional Portland cement. Um, so hempcrete's a good example. It incorporates both two of those elements. So a bio-based
Right.
component, the hemp, and then a carbonatable cement. So it's a greener alternative to a cement. It does have carbon emissions. It's not carbon negative as some people would like to claim. I think a lot of carbon negative cements are only carbon negative from their moment of setting. There was carbon emitted in their production, and only some of that will be reabsorbed during carbonation. But nevertheless, the the lime-based cement of hempcrete does remove carbon dioxide from the air during
Right.
during its setting, which goes
Right.
on for years.
Nice. Nice. So when it comes to getting these things out and to be used in the building world, do you think that's more of a consumer issue that consumers need to be asking for it, or is it a developer builder issue that they should be providing it? Or is it a symbiotic nature? Because I don't think, the way that I see it, I don't believe that unless consumers start to scream for something, that the builders or developers will necessarily bring it to them. And that's
Yeah,
unfortunate because the developers have the money to do it.
yeah,
So it's a catch 22, right?
yeah. It absolutely is a catch-22. I don't want to attribute malice here, but I think what consumers are screaming for first and foremost right now is affordable housing. There's no question about that.
Yes.
And and I think in light of that sort of affordability crisis, and I just want a home. And if I can finally afford a home, I'm not going to say, no, no, I don't want it anymore because you didn't use hempcrete. I'll take whatever I can get. And whatever you can get is going to be just bog standard concrete or brick or wood, whatever's going on. It's not going to be sustainable, and it's not going to be a stone house. You're not going to find an affordable wood, timber, and stone house, even though the carbon balance of that is excellent, right? It's much. It's not going to be done. It's going to be. It's become a luxury. Yeah, sustainable materials have become a luxury. It's certainly I wouldn't blame the consumers, and I wouldn't expect them to be too concerned about that, and rightly so. You can build a concrete house, create 20, 30 tons of carbon dioxide emissions. You can offset that. You can say, you know what, I'll take those emissions, I'll emit that, and I'll work hard to offset that if I want later on.
Good.
It's certainly easier and more affordable than the alternative, which is to wait around for a sustainable alternative to be offered to you. So I think consumers who are concerned with sustainability and the environment are likely to push their efforts somewhere else rather than trying to revolutionize the building industry when all they want is a house.
That's
So who
affordable.
is to blame? I mean, I don't know where the change needs to start, but I think consumers need to be empowered in the sense that you should be, and I think that really starts, it varies from country to country, but in licensing that you can do this. You can build a rammed earth house. That's okay. You can build your hempcrete dome. That's fine. You don't need, some local council telling you, nah, that doesn't come up to you need to have that freedom. And
Right.
that's something that from country to country can be very hard to come by. And often people are not going to be bothered. On top of the affordability to then jump through all these bureaucratic hurdles, they want, if they can afford a house, they'll take what they can get, I think.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. And unfortunately, that is where we're at. It's the it's the finances that's driving the conversation.
Hmm.
And also, though, I believe most people don't know what they don't know. And if there's not a big education process that's put out there, like conversations we're having today, then consumers may not know. At least I can talk for Americans. they won't know that there's these really nice sustainable alternatives to building. And really, for me, what that means is besides for health for the consumer, we're talking about health for the planet also.
Mm.
We're talking about a symbiosis. And
Yeah.
if we don't, then both of us, both humans and the earth, are going to get sick. And we're showing that that is happening on both sides. And so we need better marketing coming from people like us, because the marketing on the other side is very good. Let me just put it that way.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's that people need to be inspired by what can be done with natural building materials, with earth, with stone, with biomass. Can be hemp. There's loads of alternative biomasses, and like you say, it's about the health of the planet. So even if we are talking about a biomass, there are, for example, I don't remember the name. There's a startup that's making sustainable insulation material from some plants that grow in ponds, and they're not cultivating, but rather there's a sort of agroecological aspect to it. So regenerative agriculture. So they're regenerating wetlands and increasing the carbon sequestration of those wetlands in the soil and in the peat that's formed in these wetlands. And they're taking out of that wetlands just what they need for these insulation materials. So they're sort of addressing the sustainability on two fronts, also regenerating nature and ecosystems, and also creating a bio-based material that contains carbon, that sequesters carbon. And I think that's a great approach, because it's yeah, sometimes we need to keep in mind that some bio-based materials, right, might sequester carbon in the sense that they are containing carbon and they're locked up in our structures. But if they're done in the context of monoculture and at the expense of biodiversity, then this is not really the direction we want to go in terms of
Sure,
sustainability.
sure,
Uh,
sure. Well, to that, what do you think any advanced solutions are? So we talk about Earth and this type of thing, but thinking more into ahead.
mhm.
Um, so what do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a good question actually, because one of the biggest problems with earth-based constructions, so rammed earth, adobe, cob is a great one. So cob, mixture of earth and hay. These things are not really they're not likely to attract there's not a lot of money to be made in just using the earth. So there always has to be some technological innovation, because that's what people are going to invest in, and that's what creates wealth, fortunately or unfortunately. So what technological solutions? Well, I mean, like I said, geocementation is quite nice. This idea of using microbes, that's quite advanced. There's additive manufacturing or 3D printing of houses and
Yes.
other robotic tools that are used to reduce the manpower that's needed to produce houses. I'm not so sure if that's the right direction to reduce that, but it is it, in the macroscopic sense. I don't know if it's the right direction, but certainly right now it's good because it enables people to do things quickly. Yes, okay, I can build a house. If I can get a printer to print my house for me, then I'm gonna be more likely uh, um, to use these sustainable materials if they can if
That's
they don't
true.
require me learning how to do things with my own hands.
That's
Um,
very true. Yeah.
so yeah, and yeah, there's of course other innovations like aerogels but to be honest, I don't think we need any kind of technological breakthrough for sustainable housing. There is no
Beautiful.
we know everything we need to know to do it right now if we wanted to.
Awesome. And that's the direction I hope we go down instead of because I'm sure you're aware of the term smart cities or the 15-minute cities, right?
Hmm.
Those cities will not in large part be employing sustainable practices.
No,
Um,
no, they're still
yeah,
largely based on concrete. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
concrete and diodes and
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yep,
So
and scarce elements, I should add. And that's something that perhaps people. It's a bit of a digression from the topic of construction materials, but yeah, a lot of this smart technology relies on scarce elements that many people probably haven't even heard of, right?
Right.
So
Right.
generators and electric motors fire all the rare earth elements, hafnium, dysporium, and all these. If you look at the periodic table, you see, we're using more and more of it, and more elements are being added to the lists of critical raw materials, critical some for batteries, for motors, for generators, for photovoltaics. And what's particularly problematic with these scarcer resources, not only are they scarcer, but also the mass of material that needs to be extracted and the amount of energy that needs to be invested in order to get these materials is really huge. So that actually creates this spiraling disaster of mining tailings. And as we exploit the low-hanging fruit, the mining digs deeper and extracting larger and larger quantities of geomaterial of earth and rock to get to these things that enable basically our smart cities. So I prefer to imagine a future of smaller communities. Yes, I think things should be walkable. But a lot of this high-tech visionary of skyscrapers and flying cars is probably unlikely to be compatible with a harmonious interface with the spheres of our environment, with the
I
biosphere, the
agree.
hydrosphere.
I agree. So we'll probably see in the future. I think that die has been set. I believe those cities and those structures are coming. What I can
Mhm.
hope to see though is that more of us start to go back towards nature, towards a more natural approach, towards more sustainable practices. It's been said that by a few people out there that the earth can't sustain, 8 billion people. More importantly, they think it's going to extrapolate to 16 billion or 24
Yeah.
billion. The thing is, though, my opinion on this is what we can't do is we can't continue to build things that have been built with planned obsolescence in mind.
Hmm.
That's consumer madness, and it's a throwaway world. We throw away our cell phones in the houses and all these other things,
Absolutely.
and we can't keep raping the resources from the planet to do this over and over and over.
Yeah.
Also, when it comes to sustainable farming practices and all this other stuff, if we move back to the villages and the smaller communities that you're talking about,
Mhm.
people could have enough of a little farm garden plot that they could feed the entire village, and we can do that village to village to village to village.
Absolutely.
We
There's
don't
there's
need
no
to have.
fundamental barrier to sustainability. We just we're not able to bring ourselves to do it.
You're right. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Uh, there's enough resources to keep everyone happy. I mean, what brings us joy in our life is not doesn't cost the earth. You mentioned population. I think the number, it's hard to say. I mean, 8 billion, 10 billion, it depends what those people are doing. And it's roughly 1% of the world's population is directly involved in producing our food, and only
Right.
slightly more than that are directly involved in producing our houses. Um, and actually, those are the things that we really need. The rest is just decoration, right? We need a roof over our head, somewhere comfortable to sleep in, healthy food to eat. And everything else is really just dancing around and decorating it. Some
I
would add
agree.
healthcare. We do need to care for each other, we need to feed each other, we need to house each other, and none of those is something that we don't know how to do sustainably right now. None of those
Right.
require uh, uh, any kind of non-existing technology. So yeah, I think that we are going to need inevitably, whether it's because of climate change or whatever change that happens in us that we decide now we have to live sustainably. I think we won't find it traumatizing. I don't think there's a lot to be scared of. I think we'll learn to appreciate the things that we really care and love for. And I think our houses are one of them. Everyone loves to live in a nice house.
Right.
And that's not something we need to give up in order to transition to sustainability. But these throwaway, our electronic gadgets that cost nothing. I mean, when I look at the fact that you can buy a disposable vape pen from the store for like €3, $3, whatever, it's absurd that exists, and we still claim to be pursuing sustainability, that we're throwing away, we're literally buying an electronic thing with a battery in it and then throwing it in the garbage, while scratching our heads about sustainable housing. It feels
Right.
rather absurd that we're
Well, it's the
doing.
same. It's the same with bottled water, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah,
And so much. It's like 99% of the things that we are doing and consuming, whether it's energy or resources, are in the end of the day not really those that are bringing us true joy, and we need to wean ourselves from that somehow, and whether by choice or by being faced with an ultimatum where.
right. Who knows what's going to come first? Because I think most of us are A, creatures of habit. B, we like our comfort, and so being
Exactly.
able, yeah, and so most people don't like to give up that comfort.
Yeah, I don't think anyone needs to give up comfort. I mean, your house, your life can be very comfortable without incurring a huge environmental impact. But a lot of it comes from the fact that it exists. I mean, nobody would want to give up their smartphone today. We're all addicted to it, and it's all around us. It's something that exists. Whereas, 20 years ago, you didn't miss it because it didn't exist.
Right,
So yeah, I think it's this dopamine hit that we get from consuming something, from everything being so cheap. And
right.
if you go to these Temu, I don't know if that's an app that exists in the US, TEMU,
I've
Temu.
heard of it. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the fact that you can hop on your phone and buy, a giant box of crap from China for, for
Right,
$10, and half of it ends up in the bin the next day.
right.
Um, it's a worrying sign, and I hope that this housing issue can really be an opportunity for us to focus on what's really important to us.
Sure. Well, what do you think? Last question for you before we head out here. Um, you're part of what you do is you connect people.
Mhm.
And you talked about connecting investors with startups and that type of thing. So let's start to talk about you and what you provide to people and how does that work?
So right now I offer services as a materials innovation consultant, so helping anyone with a materials-oriented innovation, with their technical problems, with their business development issues, connecting with clients, with suppliers, with other collaborators to find synergies. And I also work as an investment associate with an investment agency, Costa Norte, and we help connect startups, mostly in the Series A stage, with our network of investors. We have a big data bank of investors. And one kind of thing I can say in this aspect of investors is that while we like to say that these large polluting companies don't care and aren't doing anything positive for the environment or for sustainable construction materials, actually they are throwing a lot of money for other people, for startups, and for, yeah, basically small companies and startups to do that for them, rather than establish a new business unit for
Uh,
green cement within their own organization. They're happy to invest in external ventures, doing that in exchange for a stake in that. So anyone who's interested in a green construction venture, a green building material venture, can find partners with this corporate venture capital, usually in exchange for equity. So those investors are out there. And actually, specifically startups in the green construction tech, the rounds are very large. There's a lot of money being raised in seed rounds by green cement companies, and it's mostly using technologies that have been known for at least decades, if not centuries.
gotcha, gotcha. Well, maybe we could have talks about our hemp dome homes.
Yeah, yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah. All right, Dorian. So If somebody wanted to talk to you more or find out what you're doing, or if you could help them, how can they reach out to you? How can they find you?
Uh, well, maybe you can put my email on on the YouTube video.
Yeah.
Also, I'm on LinkedIn, and my name is relatively Googleable, so I mean, I'm not that I'm quite findable. Um,
All right. So yes, I'll put all that information in. So, all right. Well, before I get to that piece, do you have any questions for us or any statements that we haven't talked about that you would like to address?
well, I just like to say that I'm really inspired by the homes you build and by the ribbed dome construction, and I really look forward to seeing where this goes. I see a lot of potential in this in the basic concept and the elements that you're bringing together to create these homes, and also in empowering people to build their own homes. So I find that really terrific, and I really hope that the kind of thing that you're doing uh, expands and becomes more common, with people being able to, with some input, with some maybe manual assistance as well, create their own homes. And in particular, domes. One thing that I would add is that materials that function well in compression are quite common and quite easy to produce sustainably. So large spans of concrete are quite hard to replace unless you're using very high grade timber. So a dome, by its very nature, is something that is I think very conducive towards sustainable construction. So yeah, I really
Sure.
think you're on a fantastic track.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And my viewers, my solution seekers, if you have any questions for Dorian, as always, put them here below and I'll get them right back to him. I will put his contact information into the description right up front so you can find him pretty quickly and pretty easily. So, as everybody knows, we are seeking solutions every day to live a more sustainable lifestyle. This interview is one of those. And we have appreciated Dorian's time. And I hope you have a great day. And it looks like the sun's going down there in Spain.
Yeah, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
inside and make some dinner soon.
Nice. So beautiful. Guys, this is Dorian and Coach Scott out. Peace.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Goodbye.
Bye.